Every day another door closes, but a new one opens again. Whoa, every way we travel must end, but there another road begins. Whatever you've seen, haven't you heard?
To encounter your art in a way that's satisfying to them. In impressive figure drawing, what we're doing is turning the spotlight around from the model to the artist. Because when you open this door, when you take a bite of the fruit of the tree of knowledge and you realize, oh, I see, the model is being honest with me. So now, it's up to me to become honest in return. And it's not so easy as just throwing off your clothes and saying, yeah, now I'm being honest too. You've got to open up your heart. And so it's a much more difficult process. And there's no formula. You can't just unbutton your buttons and say, oh, okay, I get it. You have to figure out, how do I become authentic in this encounter? Believe it or not, I'm basing this whole idea on alchemy. Basically it's a bunch of smelly old guys in the basement trying to turn lead into gold. That doesn't make any sense unless you think about it symbolically. And then all of a sudden it starts to make sense. And the more I study alchemy, and particularly the psychological work of Carl Jung, he's the guy that really discovered that alchemy produced not only science on the one hand, but it was the inception of psychology on the other hand. Because essentially what you're doing is you're looking at the material world and you're seeing a lot of stuff about the material world, but you're also seeing inside yourself. So the basic principle of alchemy is you're taking the subject and the object and separating them. There's a tension between these two objects, kind of like yin and yang, or the positive and negative poles in an electrical system. And so the tension creates an energy. And the energy is what we're after when we're producing a work of art. And I hate to use that word producing, because for me art is a way of understanding the world. The production is just sort of I feel like there's a secretary off in the background, and the secretary is taking notes. And so the activity is me experiencing the world, and I find out later that the secretary is taking notes, and there's a record left behind, and that's what the drawing is. And so, the more you think about this process as being just a way of being alive in the world, then it's easier to concentrate on this idea of the forces between the negative and the positive, the yin and the yang. So this second lecture, I think I mentioned last time that we live in this really literal culture. We're very scientifically minded. We don't have very many pathways to the inner world, and so it's really easy for us to think of everything as being literal. You think of the model drawing, or the artist drawing a model, it's easy for us to say, oh yeah, I know all about that. I've been doing that my whole life, right? But if you start thinking about it symbolically, what I discovered is you open this door to understanding the world, but the door swings both ways. And so you're not only understanding the world, but you're understanding yourself through the world. And the more I started digging into this, it just opens up and it gets wider and wider as you go down. And to me, it seems like it connects with the entire universe. It connects with everything that's important about being a human. And I know that's kind of hard to believe. Why is drawing from the nude model so different than everything else we do? And all I can say is it's because of its symbol. It's because the nude model is being honest, is being authentic, And what we're trying to do as authentic human beings is to have this relationship with the authentic world. So, so this second lecture I'm calling sex education. And the first thing I need is a volunteer. Anybody volunteer? Camera. God, you're so courageous. Okay. Okay, I'm looking at you. I'm going to use you. Okay, this idea of the separation of the two is something that is really, really important for this process. I'm sure you've heard this phrase that we don't know who discovered water, but we're pretty sure it wasn't a fish, right? Because if you're in a medium, there's no way you can see it. It's only after you leave a situation that you can really see what's going on. And I've got a great example of this. About 2 or 3 years ago, I flew to Europe. I landed in Amsterdam, and it wasn't 10 minutes I was out of the plane before I learned a very important thing about the U.S. So I exit the plane, I'm going down the hallway, what do you call that? Here's the bathroom. Oh, great, I was going to use the bathroom. So, I go in, there's a wall of urinals, and it's about maybe 30 or 40 guys in here. And in the middle of the room, this woman mopping the floor. And so, I'm doing my business and I'm keeping an eye on her out of the corner of my eye. And meanwhile, I'm looking at all these guys trying to figure out if they're as freaked out as I am. And no, not a one of them. It was like she wasn't even there. And the reason this was so important is because it was right at the time in North Carolina when they passed this law that said you can't go into a restroom unless the sign on the outside matches the one on your birth certificate, right? So I'm thinking, if this situation was happening in North Carolina, apparently the entire community would just collapse. And it makes you realize how kind of fragile and weird our culture is. And that's an experience that I won't forget for a long time. And I wouldn't have, that's the kind of thing that teaches you something in a way that you can't really understand until you get removed from the situation, right? So that works very nicely to work into the subject that I also think is really important for dealing with this kind of situation, and that is that perhaps you realize that we inhabit a very weird culture. This is a culture that was founded by Puritans, who were people that fled Europe, braved the treacherous passage across the Atlantic and found this new land where they had the freedom to live out greater repression than they could do at home, And even though these people died out fairly quickly after they lived here, believe it or not, they left a legacy that is very much in operation in our culture today. And so I want to illuminate that a little bit, because that's going to keep coming back. I mean, the culture has such an influence on us. And usually it's a fish and water thing. You don't realize it until you're able to step outside it and really take a look at what's happening. So I want to talk about the erotic force. So Eros, I'm using in the original Greek sense of the word. That's the force that keeps us alive. When you get up in the morning, you put your feet on the floor, it's Eros that makes you do that. When you go to work, it's Eros that drives you in that direction. When you hug your kids, it's Eros. When you get sick and you fall into bed, it's Eros that's trying to keep you alive. Now, if I said, this bookshelf over here is full of erotic literature, I know what you're thinking. You think it's pornography, right? That's what the culture teaches us. And I say, well, no, they're art books. And to me, this is part of Eros. This is part of being alive. And what I want to do is demonstrate that Eros is this whole thing between the earth down here and heaven up here. And everything that happens to us in our lives is driven by this erotic energy that drives us from the physical into the spiritual. And this is true of all life. You look at an acorn, and you say, what's the difference between the acorn and the oak tree? It's the oak tree has experienced a whole life full of Eros. And what is it that's inside the acorn? It's a vision of what's to come. You know, the acorn wants to transform. And Eros is the process. If you look at any plant, it's always growing upward. What's it growing toward? It's growing toward heaven. And you could say, oh, it's going to the sun or to the sky or something. But all of this is common to life. And so there's this kind of wonderful volcano of energy that is common to all of life, that is just bubbling and driving everything that's alive. And to think about the difference between you and a dead person is that the dead person doesn't have any Eros. So the dead person has a body just like you, but you are full of Eros, and so you're always pulled forward into something. And what the Puritans were really freaked out by that. I think the Puritans really believed that we are spiritual creatures, that by some divine mistake we're thrust into bodies. And so they really tried to live lives that had nothing to do with the body. So as a result of that, what they did was they collapsed this whole system of erotic energy into the single fact of sex. And I'm putting a male and a female on here, so to get in these opposites. So all of this energy that is inherent to every one of us, they collapse into this one very narrow thing of sex. And they tried to get even rid of that, and they couldn't do it. So they tried to minimize it as much as possible. There's one Puritan whose epitaph on his gravestone read, "God, forgive me for loving my wife so much." And I just think of God saying, "You gotta be kidding. I give you this beautiful religion and this spectacular body, and that's what you do with it?" So the Puritans were very good at just eliminating all of this other stuff, the kind of physical energy and the spiritual energy. And this up here is the erotic energy that is more spiritual in nature. And I think of, the mystics. St. Teresa of Avila is one of my favorite mystics. And you read her writing, and she's praying to God, but it's extremely juicy. It's very erotic stuff. Or Mirabai, my favorite East Indian poet from 16th century, I believe, was this bhakti kind of a priestess, and she was in love with her dark mountain god called Dirlandaya. And the stuff that she writes is just makes you sweat. It is so incredibly sexy, but she's praying basically. So all that stuff is up in the upper part of kind of spiritual Eros. So the Puritans died out, and for some reason this idea that that erotic energy is this, has persisted to this day, which is really unfortunate. So the Puritans kind of minimized sex as much as they could, and then they took it out and left it on the curb. They just had no use for an erotic life. So then about 150 years ago, the advertising industry comes along. They're walking along and they see, sitting by the side of the road, this package that the Puritans left behind. And, the advertisers are saying, oh my God, this is just sitting here. Well, this is stuff we can use. And hey, finders keepers, right? So they take the same deal where the erotic energy is focused on sex, and they use it to sell products. Because they realize every one of us has a body. Every one of us is full of Eros. So why not take that energy that's already been compressed and just use that sexual energy to separate you from your money. So sex was being used in the 1870s to sell tobacco, in the 1930s to sell, varnish. We see it all over the place now. In fact, the state of Israel is using these really sexy ads to sell tourism to Israel. I mean, the least sexy thing I can think of. Mm-hmm. But the fact is that we respond to that because we are so hungry for an erotic life. And so what I want to do, one of the things I want to do in this class, is to have us really lean against that cultural paradigm. And I think our educational system is really the advertising industry. We are all born into it from the day we are born until the day we die. We can never get away from advertising. And there is a value system, and there is a point to advertising. And what they're trying to do is, first of all, to assume that because we are all compressed like this, and because we are Puritans, that if we feel something in our bodies, it's got to be sex. Because that's what the Puritans tell us it is. And so we already feel guilty about that. So then the advertiser comes with a product, and they say, if you're feeling this, all you need is, the fancy lotion, or the coffee, or whatever it is. And you're thinking, okay, I feel this thing. He's right. I want the sexy woman draped over the car. You buy the car, and the sexy woman isn't there. Well, okay, I got the car anyway. That's how we're like milked like cows. Our bodies produce this energy, and the advertisers, who to me are the same as pornography, are really using that energy to force money out of us. So one of the ways that we can work against that is to try to open up this space. To say, okay, this is the condition that we're in, that we are forced to kind of believe this. But the real fact of the matter is, there's all this other stuff that is available to us. And the more we can expand that, then I think the richer our lives become. I asked for a volunteer among my sculptures. This is called syzygy. It's a beautiful word. S-Y-Z-Y-G-Y. It's a Greek word that means the conjunction of the male and female. It's like the couple. And in scientific terms, it's used as a indication of when the planets line up in the heavens. That's called a syzygy. And Carl Jung, whom I'm always going to be quoting in these things, because he is so wise and he really understands how human beings are built. Jung talks about the syzygy as kind of a balance, that the more we achieve syzygy, the more we are balanced. And Jung says that each one of us has a life task, and he calls it individuation. And the point of individuation is to achieve balance within yourself. And this is common to most religions and other kinds of positive energy systems. So individuation is taking charge of the fact that you're different from everybody else. Not apologizing for that, but saying, yes, this is who I am. Recognizing that you have certain qualities and that other qualities you don't have. And that we're going to achieve balance by bringing these things together. So, incidentally, the only reason this is here is because I usually hang it from the ceiling. So think about this floating in the water. And this is a male figure and a female figure, and they share shin bones here. So think about the water level being right here. So in this world, I'm a person with a certain quality that is put into the world. And last time I checked, it's still true, I'm a male. So my physique and my psyche and my role and all of that is the masculine part sticking up above the water. And what Carl Jung says is we are actually both. And interestingly enough, in Genesis, it says God created humans in God's image. Male and female, he created them. Right? And most people look at that and they say, okay, Adam and Eve, he created both of those. And I look at that and I say, male and female, he created them. So what Carl Jung says is that I am a male on the top, but under the water, I'm a female. So I have a soul inside me, invisible, that is feminine. And if you're born with one of these kinds of physiques, the opposite is true. So you are born with these feminine qualities, and you take the feminine role, and you are treated like a feminine person in the world. And inside, you have a male character that is part of who you are. The female character for me is called the anima, and the male character for a woman is called the animus. And you hear this a lot in culture, that's where that terminology comes from, is when a man is possessed by his anima, he gets really moody, and I don't have a better description of it, but what that is the man not being able to incorporate his feminine principle. And this happens with women. Women get possessed by the animus and they become argumentative and sort of recalcitrant. And it's because the woman isn't able to incorporate the feminine or the masculine qualities in herself. And so the point of individuation for all of us is to try to balance those energies. So my job in my lifetime is to try to find the feminine energy in the world and realize that if that causes me difficulty, and it often does, it's not because of the image out in the world, it's because I haven't achieved balance within my own life. So now you can begin to see how this amazing confluence between the artist and the model can become a really powerful thing. Now, the first thing you think of course, is gender. And that indeed is a big separator. So anytime you have two objects and you separate them, the more distance there is between them, the more energy there is. So if you have a model and an artist of the same gender, they don't quite separate as far as the opposite genders, but there's still a distance. Last time we did this exercise with gravity. You guys missed that. Where I'm using gravity as a kind of metaphor for Eros. That any two objects in the universe are attracted to each other. Think about planets or stars. You know, two stars are up somewhere in the universe, and they have an attraction for each other. And so, you know, they come together, and they get closer and closer, and they begin to spin around each other. And eventually, one star will collapse into the other, and they fuse, and there's a huge explosion, and something new is created, a solar system or another star. And that is the story of life. So Eros is all about the two opposites coming together out of attraction, fusing, exploding, and creating something new. And you can see this everywhere. And sex is a really great example because it's a very human way of participating in the deepest part of your soul in this experience. And I would say, I'm looking at the rest of nature, and maybe you notice this, that sex isn't really a very big deal in the rest of nature. Like think of the elk. You know, the male elk grows this enormous, structure of antlers, which is very, very expensive. And he goes around in the fall and starts, thrashing the bushes and pulling down the trees and calling out to his buddies. And they come together and have this enormous fight. And, it takes weeks and weeks, and it's very expensive for the bull elk. And finally, the winner gets to collect the cow, and she comes over and he has 30 seconds, 10 seconds of sex. And then they both say, thank God that's over, we can go back to eating grass. And it's no big deal. We'll see you next year. Right? Whereas in the human being, sex is this enormous thing. And if you have to wait till Saturday night, it's like a real deprivation. Well, why is that? Why is human sex so different? Well, I would say the reason is because this is a very kind of thin layer that rests on top of this huge volcano of Eros. And so the reason I think sex is so powerful is because it is so symbolic. So when you think about this principle of the universe, that any two objects come together, they're attracted to each other, and they create this torque, and they spin around each other, and finally, these two opposite elements fuse and they explode. Sex is a perfect example of that cosmic process. And I think that's why it's so powerful. And having said that, that's not all there is. There are all kinds of other energies in here that it's very hard for us to see because of this fact that we live in a Puritan pornographic culture. So what the Puritan culture does is it squeezes us from this side, and the pornographic culture squeezes us from this side, and we end up like being stuck in the elevator doors, excuse me, a little help over here, They are crammed together, and we human beings with actual bodies are forced to try to live in that little space in between those two things. You know, it's kind of like trying to set up home in between the back of the refrigerator and the wall. And it's an impossible place to live. And you can feel this in your own life. You know, if you start to feel some kind of excitement, it's not very far before, on the one side, you feel guilt because you're being sexually stimulated, or that's what you're being told. And on the other side, somebody's going to take advantage of you because you're feeling that way. You know, they're going to use it to sell you something. And so there's like almost no room to maneuver in here. So one of the things that I'm actually trying to do with my whole life, as a sculptor of the body, as a figurative sculptor, I've done this since I was a little kid. I'm fascinated with the intelligence and the magnanimity of the body. It is so huge. It connects to everything in the universe. And if you think about it, your brain is imprisoned in the dark box that is your skull, right? I mean, I hate to think about the body this way, but in a way it's kind of like a computer in that it gets information from a certain source, like your senses, and it just processes the senses, and it tries to make meaning out of these inputs. And so, if you think about it, your brain is inside of a black box, and the only reason why it feels like you have this connection with the outside world is because you're able to interpret these signals and turn it into meaning. We have this amazing sensitive body, and if we are constrained, we are going to have to live our lives, you know, in the tiny, tiny confines that the culture allows us. So I'm suggesting we all take that opportunity to say, you know, I'm going to expand against the culture, against the Puritans, against the pornographers, and I'm going to enrich my life and everything I feel in my body. I'm not going to feel guilty about it, and I'm not going to let anybody use my own Eros to sell me something. My mother, God bless her, said this beautiful thing about guilt. She said, guilt. It's like buying chocolate. It's okay to have a little now and then, but don't binge. So I just love that, you know. It's okay to feel guilty if you do something bad, but if there's something going on in your body, don't feel bad about that. That's your body coming alive. And the first thing that happens when you see a nude model, and especially for like a guy drawing a woman, is you start to feel alarmed that there's all kinds of stuff you're feeling, and you think, oh my God, I've got to start feeling guilty because this is sex. And Freud comes along. God, you know, Freud was a brilliant guy, but he did not do us a great deal of service by saying everything that you feel is because of sexual repression. Well, Carl Jung was Freud's student, and maybe you know this, that the two of them really formed a tight bond, but Carl Jung could never just reduce everything to sex. He said, no, there's all kinds of other stuff going on. And he started to do this process of illuminating all that. And he gave us language that, pretty scientific language for stuff that goes on in the human soul. And so in a way, it's very parallel to religion. And if you're a person that is really fed up with religion, one thing you can do to access the inner world is to do that same thing through Carl Jung. Because you can avoid all of the dogma and the terrible history of, you know, religious repression and all that, and still be able to find the language for what's going on in your soul. The thing I want you to keep in mind tonight, if we manage to figure out this model situation, is try to inhabit this space where you're aware of the opposite between you and the model. And you don't need to think about this. This is just an awareness of your soul. You know, another person comes into the room, and if they are shed of their clothes, which means their persona, their cultural protections, all of the things that identify their kind of personality, they are just a raw human being who's being honest with you. And then you can begin to see, oh my gosh, you know, there are things that are different about us, and there are things that are similar. And there is at once an attractive force, which is the Eros, and a repulsive force. So, Cameron, we're going to give a demonstration of what this relationship is like. Are you ready?
I guess so.
Are you nervous?
Not yet.
Good one. Okay. So, put your hands on my shoulders. Okay. This is a model of the relationship. And if we are in a relationship with each other, you know, obviously there's a connection here, but we're both standing on our own feet. If you back up a little bit, all of a sudden there's a little bit of tension, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the more we back up, the more tension there is. And the more we lose our individuality. And if we get far enough away, it becomes a little bit dangerous, right? You can feel that if one of us loses our balance, we're both in trouble because we are a unit. So this is a really good demonstration of this tension between the two opposites. So what I'd like us to do is for everybody to stand up and do one of these bridges. Get with a partner, and you can, let's get into this position. Just put your hands on each other. Give a little bit of room in the front and back.
No, I can't promise. I'm really bad.
So you're just supporting your own weight. And now take a tiny baby step back, and you can start to feel, you know, the tension between the other person. Take a tiny step back. You can feel more tension. So what I want you to be aware of is the erotic attachment is the gravity that is going from your body into the earth through the other person. Right? And the opposite of that is the support that, or the resistance that is in the other person's body. It's holding you up. So the gravity connection is the Eros, and the repulsive force of the other person holding you up is the negative part, what's called the thanatos. Okay, so
Yeah, that's correct.
so I want us to have a sense in our flesh of what it's like to have a relationship with the model. So it's a two-way connection. It's like a bridge across a river. And the space in between us is where that dynamo is. So last time I mentioned this kind of wild animal, this third thing that exists between the artist and the model. And it's not either the artist or the model, it's both. And so our two psyches together create this third thing that creates the energy.
Whoa, every way